Step aboard the Sapphire rails, a luxurious train bound for Budapest, where glamour hides deadly secrets. When a Hungarian diplomat is found murdered in a locked compartment, stabbed with a sapphire-hilted dagger, only Hercule Poirot can unravel the web of lies. A Russian countess with a scandalous past, a grieving governess seeking answers, a brash American with a fortune at stake, a secretive French couple, and a guarded German doctor. All have motives, but who wielded the blade? As the train races through snowy Europe, Poirot's little gray cells uncover a smuggling ring, a hidden microfilm, and a killer's cunning plan. In just 30 seconds, enter a world of elegance and intrigue, where no one is what they seem, and murder waits in the shadows. Chapter 1. The Departure from Paris. The Gare de l'Est in Paris shimmered with the frenetic pulse of a grand departure. Porters darted through the crowd, their trolleys laden with steamer trunks and hat boxes, while the air carried the sharp tang of coal smoke and the faint perfume of expensive colognes. Beneath the vast iron and glass canopy, the sapphire rails stood resplendent, its navy blue carriages gleaming like polished sapphires, each window framed in silver filigree that caught the late afternoon light. This was no ordinary train. It was a rolling palace, destined for Budapest, ferrying a select coterie of Europe's privileged through the heart of the continent. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his charcoal overcoat and polished patent leather shoes, paused on the platform to adjust his Homburg hat. His small, precise hands smoothed the brim, and his green eyes, sharp as cut glass, surveyed the scene with quiet intensity. His mustache, waxed to perfection, quivered slightly as he noted the kaleidoscope of passengers. A fur-clad matron issuing curt orders to a harried maid, a young couple entwined in whispered farewells, and a solitary gentleman whose restless pacing betrayed some inner disquiet. To Poirot, each gesture, each glance, was a thread in the tapestry of human nature, and he, the master weaver, missed nothing. A familiar voice broke his reverie. "Mon cher Poirot, what fortune to have you aboard." Monsieur Bouc, director of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagons-Lits, approached with a broad smile, his round face flushed with the excitement of the journey. His suit, though finely tailored, strained slightly at the waist, a testament to his fondness for fine dining. "A last-minute cancellation has secured you a first-class compartment. Number 12, a fine one. You will find the company most eclectic." His eyes twinkled, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease, a shadow that lingered beneath Bouc's customary bonhomie. "Eclectic, you say?" Poirot's voice was soft, his French accent precise. "And perhaps, mon ami, not without its complications." Bouc chuckled, but his glance darted toward the train. "You see too much, as always. Come, let us board. The Sapphire. Rails waits for no one, not even Hercule Poirot." As they stepped into the carriage, the interior enveloped Poirot in understated opulence. Polished mahogany panels lined the corridor, their rich grain reflecting the soft glow of brass sconces. The carpet, a deep burgundy, muffled their footsteps, and the faint clink of crystal from the dining car ahead promised an evening of elegance. Poirot's compartment was a marvel of compact luxury, a plush velvet seat, a fold-down table of inlaid wood, and a narrow bed draped in crisp linens. He placed his small valise on the rack, noting with approval the gleaming cleanliness of every surface. Order and method, he thought, were the foundations of a civilized journey. Settling by the window, Poirot allowed his mind to catalogue the passengers he had observed on the platform. There was the Russian Countess, Irina Volkov, her silver hair swept beneath a sable hat, her posture regal yet brittle, as if guarding a secret too heavy to bear. A young Englishwoman, introduced by Bouc as Miss Clara Henshaw, a governess, clutched a worn carpet-bag, her pale face etched with nervous anticipation. An American, Mr. Harold Grayson, strode with the confidence of new money, his loud voice proclaiming his success in Chicago's steel trade. A Hungarian gentleman, Laszlo Kovács, moved with the measured grace of a diplomat, his dark eyes scanning the crowd as if expecting an ambush. And then there were the others, a French couple, a German doctor, each a puzzle piece in the mosaic Poirot was already assembling. The train's whistle pierced the air, and with a gentle shudder, the Sapphire rails began its journey eastward. The platform slid away, replaced by the gray sprawl of Paris, giving way to the open countryside. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled, his thoughts turning to the undercurrent of tension he had sensed in Bouc's demeanor. A journey on such a train was never merely a passage from one city to another. It was a stage, and its players were rarely without their dramas. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Poirot resolved to dine early. The dining car awaited, and with it, the opportunity to observe his fellow travelers more closely. His little gray cells hummed with anticipation. Something, he felt, was stirring beneath the surface of this elegant voyage, something that would demand the full measure of Hercule Poirot's genius. Chapter 2. The First Night. The dining car of the Sapphire rails was a vision of opulence, its elegance rivaling the grand salons of Paris. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over tables draped in starched white linen, each adorned with silver cutlery that gleamed like moonlight on a still lake. The clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversation filled the air, punctuated by the rhythmic clatter of the train as it sliced through the darkening French countryside. Hercule Poirot, seated at a small table near the center of the car, adjusted his tie and surveyed the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, missed nothing, not the nervous flutter of a hand, nor the fleeting glance that betrayed a hidden thought. His mustache, meticulously waxed, quivered slightly as he sipped a glass of Chateau Margaux, its bouquet as complex as the company around him. The passengers, a constellation of wealth and intrigue, were arranged at their tables like pieces on a chessboard. To his left, Countess Irina Volkov presided over her meal with the hauteur of a czarina, her silver hair catching the chandelier's light, her emerald necklace a vivid slash of color against her black velvet gown. Her voice, low and accented, carried an edge as she addressed the steward, demanding a fresher vintage. Opposite her sat Miss Clara Henshaw, the English governess, her plain gray dress a stark contrast to the Countess's grandeur. Miss Henshaw's hands trembled slightly as she cut her sole meunière, her eyes darting toward the far end of the car where Laszlo Kovács, the Hungarian diplomat, sat alone. Kovács, lean and hawkish, ate with mechanical precision, his dark suit impeccable, his expression guarded as if he carried the weight of a nation's secrets. Across from Poirot, Mr. Harold Grayson, the American industrialist, dominated his table with boisterous tales of Chicago's steel empire. His broad face, flushed from wine, was framed by a mane of sandy hair, and his gold cufflinks flashed as he gestured expansively. "This train, now it's a marvel," he boomed, addressing no one in particular. "But it ain't got nothing on the Pullman cars back home." His laugh, loud and unguarded, drew a faint frown from the French couple nearby. Monsieur and Madame Dubois. They were young, stylish, and absorbed in each other, their heads bent close over a shared dessert, their whispers inaudible, but their intimacy palpable. At a solitary table, Herr Wilhelm Schmidt, a German doctor, sat with a medical journal open beside his plate, though his eyes rarely left the other diners, his thin lips pursed in thought. Poirot, savoring the delicate flavors of his coq au vin, catalogued these observations with the methodical care of a scientist. The Countess's imperious demeanor masked a brittleness, as if she feared exposure. Miss Henshaw's unease suggested a personal stake in the journey, perhaps tied to Kovach, whose aloofness hinted at a man accustomed to danger. Grayson's bravado seemed a shield for something less certain, while the Dubois couple's secrecy suggested a purpose beyond mere romance. Herr Schmidt, with his clinical detachment, was an enigma, his presence both unobtrusive and unsettling. Each passenger, Poirot mused, was a thread in a tapestry yet to be woven, and he, Hercule Poirot, would unravel its pattern. The meal progressed, the stewards gliding silently between tables, their white, gloved hands deftly clearing plates and refilling glasses. Outside, the landscape blurred into a velvet darkness, broken only by the occasional flicker of a village light. Poirot was contemplating a second glass of wine when a scream, sharp and visceral, tore through the dining car. The chatter ceased, forks froze midair, and every head turned toward the corridor. The sound, unmistakably female, carried a note of terror that chilled the warm air. Poirot set down his glass, his pulse quickening, and rose with a calm deliberation that belied his racing mind. Monsieur Bouc, who had been dining with the train's chief steward at a corner table, appeared at Poirot's side, his face ashen. "Mon cher Poirot," he whispered, his voice tight with urgency. "We need you at once. There has been a tragedy." Without waiting for a response, Bouc led Poirot through the dining car, where passengers exchanged hushed speculations, their eyes wide with curiosity or dread. Countess Volkov clutched her necklace, Miss Henshaw's hands flew to her mouth, and Grayson's bluster faded into a stunned silence. The Dubois couple exchanged a glance, their intimacy replaced by alertness, while Herr Schmidt closed his journal with a snap, his expression unreadable. They reached the corridor outside compartment 7, where a young steward, Pierre, stood guard, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, it's Monsieur Kovach," he stammered. He's dead." Bouc pushed open the door, revealing a scene that froze Poirot's breath. Laszlo Kovach lay sprawled across the compartment's narrow bed, his dark eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, his face contorted in a final moment of shock. A dagger, its hilt encrusted with a single glinting sapphire, protruded from his chest, the blood staining his white shirt a stark crimson. The compartment, compact yet luxurious, was undisturbed save for a few papers scattered on the desk and a half-burned cigarette in an ashtray, its acrid scent lingering in the air. Poirot stepped forward, his movements precise, his senses alert. "Do not touch anything," he instructed, his voice low but commanding. He knelt beside the body, noting the dagger's ornate craftsmanship, the angle of the wound suggesting a single, forceful thrust. The window was sealed, its latch intact, and the door had been locked from the inside, according to Pierre, who swore no one had entered or left since Kovacs retired after dinner. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on the cigarette. Its brand, unfamiliar, struck him as significant, and the papers, which bore the crest of the Hungarian Foreign Ministry. A small leather notebook lay partially open, a single phrase visible in Kovacs's precise handwriting. "The Sapphire holds the key." Bouc, wringing his hands, whispered, "What does it mean, Poirot? A robbery? A crime of passion?" Poirot rose, dusting his knees with a handkerchief. "It is too early to say, mon ami. But this is no ordinary murder. The locked door, the dagger, the note, all suggest a mind both cunning and deliberate." He turned to Pierre. "Summon the passengers to the dining car in 1 hour. I must speak with them, and ensure this compartment remains untouched." As Pierre hurried away, Poirot's little gray cells began their silent dance. The sapphire rails, with its glittering facade, had become a stage for murder, and each passenger a potential player in a deadly drama. The countess, the governess, the industrialist, the lovers, the doctor. All had been in the dining car, yet none admitted to seeing Kovacs after he left. Someone, Poirot knew, was concealing the truth. The sapphire, he sensed, was more than a jewel. It was a clue to a motive as dark as the night outside. As the train rumbled toward its next stop, Poirot resolved to unravel the mystery before the killer could strike again. Chapter 3. The Locked Compartment. The sapphire rails pressed onward through the night, its wheels singing a relentless cadence against the tracks, while inside compartment 7, death held court. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold, his small frame silhouetted against the corridor's dim light, his green eyes absorbing every detail of the grim tableau. Laszlo Kovacs lay motionless, the sapphire-hilted dagger a cruel punctuation in his chest. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the faint, lingering bitterness of the half-burned cigarette in the ashtray. The compartment, though compact, retained its elegance. Mahogany panels polished to a mirror sheen, a velvet curtain swaying gently with the train's motion, and a small desk cluttered with papers bearing the Hungarian diplomatic seal. Yet it was the locked door and sealed window that gripped Poirot's mind, presenting a puzzle as intricate as any he had faced. Monsieur Bouc hovered behind him, his usual joviality replaced by a pallor that matched the snow gathering outside. "Poirot, how is it possible? The door was locked from within, the window unopened. No one could have entered or left." His voice trembled, betraying the strain of a man unaccustomed to such horrors on his cherished train. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Bouc's agitation. "Calm yourself, mon ami. The impossible is merely the possible in disguise. We must observe, deduce, and trust the little gray cells." He stepped forward, his patent leather shoes silent on the burgundy carpet, and began his examination with the precision of a surgeon. The dagger, embedded deeply, suggested a strike of both strength and intent. Its hilt, adorned with a single, flawless sapphire, gleamed with an almost mocking beauty. Poirot noted the absence of defensive wounds on Kovacs's hands, suggesting he had been taken unawares or incapacitated before the fatal blow. The cigarette, its brand obscure, bore a faint trace of lipstick, a detail that piqued his curiosity. The papers on the desk included routine diplomatic correspondence. But one sheet, partially crumpled, bore a handwritten list of names. None familiar, yet each underlined with urgency. He turned to the door, its lock intact, the key still in place on the inside. The window, a narrow pane of reinforced glass, was latched securely, its frame unmarred by scratches or forced entry. Poirot's fingers traced the walls, searching for hidden panels or irregularities, but the craftsmanship of the sapphire rails was flawless. "A locked room," he murmured, his mustache twitching. "Yet every lock has its key, and every killer their method." Bouc, wringing his hands, ventured, "Could it be suicide, Poirot? A man driven to despair, locking himself away?" Poirot's eyes flashed with disdain for the suggestion. "Non, non, mon ami. A man does not stab himself with such force, nor choose so ornate a weapon for so grim a task. This is murder, deliberate and planned." He gestured to the notebook, its cryptic phrase. "The sapphire holds the key," etched in Kovac's precise script. "This, I believe, is our first thread, but to what tapestry we shall see." Leaving the compartment under Pierre's vigilant guard, Poirot requested Bouc to assemble the key passengers for questioning. In the dining car, now cleared of its earlier elegance, the atmosphere was taut with unease. The chandeliers cast long shadows, and the passengers, summoned from their compartments, sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of apprehension, defiance, and curiosity. Poirot stood before them, his small stature commanding the room, his voice clear and measured. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a crime has been committed, and the truth lies among you. Monsieur Kovac was murdered in a locked compartment, a fact that suggests cunning. I ask now for your movements after dinner, and I advise honesty, for the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot are not easily deceived." Countess Irina Volkov, her emerald necklace glinting, spoke first, her voice icy. "I retired to my compartment after dinner, alone. I had no interest in that tiresome diplomat or his affairs." Her eyes, however, flickered briefly toward the corridor, betraying a hint of unease. Miss Clara Henshaw, clutching her shawl, admitted to passing compartment 7 on her way to the lounge car, but insisted she saw nothing unusual, her voice faltering as she mentioned Kovac's name. Mr. Harold Grayson, his earlier bravado subdued, claimed he spent the evening in the smoking lounge, sharing cigars with a steward who could vouch for him. Monsieur and Madame Dubois, their hands clasped tightly, swore they remained in their compartment. Their alibi seamless, but their expressions guarded. Herr Wilhelm Schmidt, the German doctor, offered a clipped account, stating he returned to his compartment to read, though his fingers tapped nervously on his journal. Poirot listened, his head tilted slightly, his mind cataloging not only their words, but their gestures. The Countess's rigid posture, Miss Henshaw's trembling lips, Grayson's forced nonchalance, the Dubois couple's synchronized glances, Schmidt's evasive eyes. Each account was plausible, yet none rang entirely true. He noted, too, the absence of any mention of the cigarette or the dagger's distinctive hilt. "Merci," he said at last, dismissing them with a wave. "But rest assured, we shall speak again." As the passengers dispersed, Poirot lingered in the dining car, his thoughts circling the locked compartment. The cigarette, with its trace of lipstick, suggested a woman's presence, yet none admitted to smoking. The sapphire in the dagger's hilt, he sensed, was more than ornamentation, perhaps a symbol, a clue to the motive. And the notebook's phrase haunted him. Was the sapphire literal, tied to the dagger, or figurative, a code for something greater? He turned to Bouc, who lingered anxiously. "Monsieur Bouc, I require access to the passenger's luggage by morning. Personal effects may reveal what words conceal, and ensure the train's blueprints are made available. I must understand the architecture of this puzzle." Bouc nodded, his relief at Poirot's involvement palpable. As Poirot retired to his compartment, the train's rhythm lulled his body but not his mind. The locked compartment was no mere trick. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown by a killer who believed themselves untouchable. But Hercule Poirot had never met a puzzle he could not solve. Outside, the snow began to fall, cloaking the world in silence, while within, the sapphire rails carried its secrets toward Budapest and toward the truth. Chapter 4. The Hidden Motives. The sapphire rails carved its path through the pre-dawn gloom, the snow-dusted fields of Austria gliding past like a silent, monochromatic dream. Inside, the train's opulent interior was hushed, its passengers cloaked in the uneasy slumber of a journey marred by murder. Hercule Poirot, however, was wide awake, his small frame seated upright in his compartment, the velvet curtains drawn back to reveal the fleeting landscape. His green eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man whose mind never rested, his fingers steepled as he sifted through the fragments of the puzzle before him. The locked compartment, the sapphire-hilted dagger, the cryptic note. Each was a piece, but the picture remained elusive. To uncover the truth, Poirot knew he must probe deeper into the hearts and secrets of those aboard. At first light, Poirot met Monsieur Bouc in the corridor, where the director's anxious demeanor betrayed a sleepless night. "Poirot, the passengers are restless," Bouc confided, his voice low. "They whisper of curses, of ghosts on the train. We must resolve this quickly, or panic will spread." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Fear, mon ami, is a fog that obscures the truth. Let us clear it with facts. Have you arranged for the luggage inspection as I requested?" Bouc nodded, leading Poirot to a private salon car where the passengers' trunks and bags had been discreetly gathered under the watchful eye of Pierre, the steward. The room, with its gilded mirrors and plush armchairs, felt incongruously serene for such a task. Poirot approached the luggage with the precision of an archaeologist unearthing relics, his gloved hands moving methodically to avoid tainting evidence. "The possessions of a person," he murmured, "reveal more than their words. Let us see what stories these tell." He began with Countess Irina Volkov's trunk, an imposing piece of leather and brass, monogrammed with her initials. Beneath layers of silk gowns and fur stoles, Poirot's deft fingers uncovered a hidden compartment, its lock expertly concealed. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a crimson ribbon, penned in Kovac's unmistakable hand. The correspondence, written in Russian, spoke of a passionate liaison in Vienna 2 years prior, now soured by accusations of deceit. One letter, dated mere weeks ago, demanded the return of a certain item or face exposure. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Had Kovacs blackmailed the Countess, and with what? Miss Clara Henshaw's modest carpet-bag yielded a different secret. Tucked beneath a spare blouse was a faded photograph of a young man, his features strikingly similar to Kovac's. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, a hint of melancholy. On the back, in a delicate script, was written, "To my dearest Clara, forever yours, Istvan." A Hungarian name, Poirot noted, and a connection to Kovács that Miss Henshaw had not disclosed. Was this man her brother, her lover, or another ghost from her past? Mr. Harold Grayson's briefcase, polished to a high sheen, contained contracts and financial ledgers, their pages dense with figures. Among them, Poirot found a draft agreement with a Budapest-based firm, one that stood to lose millions if Kovács's treaty negotiations succeeded. The margins bore Grayson's scrawled notes, his frustration evident in phrases like, "Kovács must be stopped." A motive rooted in commerce, Poirot mused, was as old as greed itself. The Dubois couple's luggage, a matched set of elegant valises, held an unexpected find, a detailed sketch of the Sapphire rail's layout, with compartment 7 circled in red ink. Nearby, a notebook listed questions about Kovács's diplomatic activities, hinting at an investigation far beyond casual curiosity. Were they merely journalists, as they claimed, or something more sinister? Herr Wilhelm Schmidt's medical bag, heavy with instruments, revealed a more troubling discovery. Alongside bandages and a stethoscope were several vials of a potent sedative, unmarked and not listed in the train's medical inventory. The doctor's meticulous nature made such an oversight unlikely. Had these been used to subdue Kovács before the fatal strike? Poirot stepped back, his mind weaving the clues into a nascent tapestry. "Each passenger," he said to Bouc, "carries a burden of motive. The Countess, perhaps scorned or threatened, the governess, tied to Kovács by a personal loss, the industrialist, driven by profit, the journalists, seeking a story or perhaps hiding one, the doctor, with means to incapacitate. But the Sapphire, mon ami, the Sapphire holds the key." Returning to compartment 7, Poirot re-examined the cryptic note in Kovács's notebook. The phrase, written in blue ink, seemed to pulse with significance. He turned his attention to the dagger, its sapphire gleaming under the compartment's soft light. A gentle prod revealed the stone was not fixed but detachable, a subtle mechanism suggesting a hidden compartment. With a delicate twist, Poirot dislodged the gem, revealing a tiny cavity within the hilt. Empty. Whatever it had contained, perhaps a document, a microfilm, or another clue, was gone. The killer, he realized, had not only taken a life, but a secret. As the train slowed near Salzburg, snow piling against the tracks, Poirot requested the train's blueprints from Bouc. The diagrams, spread across the salon's table, confirmed the compartment's walls were solid, with no hidden passages. Yet the locked door and sealed window remained a paradox. Poirot's fingers traced the blueprint, pausing at the ventilation grill above the desk. Small, unobtrusive. It was too narrow for a person, but perhaps sufficient for a tool, or a clue. He resolved to inspect it later, under better light. The passengers, summoned once more to the dining car, eyed Poirot with a mix of dread and defiance. He addressed them briefly, his voice calm but piercing. "Mesdames et messieurs, your possessions have spoken where your words have not. Secrets bind you to Monsieur Kovács, and I will uncover them. If you have withheld anything, now is the time to speak." Silence greeted him, broken only by the clink of a spoon, as Miss Henshaw stirred her tea, her hands trembling. Poirot dismissed them, his mind alight with possibilities. The empty hilt suggested the killer had sought something specific, something Kovács had guarded. The sedative vials pointed to a calculated act, not a crime of passion. and the sketch in the Dubois' luggage hinted at premeditation, perhaps knowledge of the train's vulnerabilities. As he retired to his compartment, the snow outside thickened, cloaking the world in a white shroud. The Sapphire rails, once a beacon of luxury, now carried a darker cargo, a killer who believed their tracks were covered. But Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, was not so easily eluded. The truth, he knew, was drawing closer with every mile. Chapter 5. The Alibis Unravel. The Sapphire rails lay stranded in a cocoon of snow, halted by drifts that blocked the tracks near a desolate stretch of Austrian countryside. Dawn's pale light filtered through the dining car's windows, casting a ghostly pallor over the passengers assembled at Hercule Poirot's summons. The chandeliers, dimmed to conserve power, flickered faintly, and the air held a chill that no amount of elegance could dispel. The passengers sat in tense silence, their faces etched with the strain of a night disrupted by murder and suspicion. Poirot stood before them, his compact figure radiating authority, his green eyes sharp as they swept over the gathering. His mustache, impeccably groomed despite the hour, quivered with the intensity of his focus. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a measured cadence that commanded attention. "The murder of Monsieur Laszlo Kovács is a puzzle of many pieces, but the truth begins to emerge. Each of you has claimed your innocence, yet your alibis, like the snow outside, do not hold under scrutiny. Let us examine them, and let the little gray cells uncover what you have concealed." He turned first to Countess Irina Volkov, whose regal posture could not mask the flicker of unease in her eyes. "Madame la Comtesse, you stated you retired to your compartment after dinner alone. Yet letters found in your trunk suggest a history with Monsieur Kovács, a history of passion turned to bitterness. Did you meet him that evening, perhaps to confront him over his threats?" The Countess's lips tightened, her emerald necklace glinting as she drew herself up. "Monsieur Poirot, I will not deny a past acquaintance. Yes, I met Kovács briefly in the corridor before dinner to demand the return of my letters. He refused, mocking me. But I did not see him after that, and I certainly did not enter his compartment." Her voice was steady, but her fingers clutched her shawl, betraying a tremor. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Miss Clara Henshaw, whose pale face seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, you admitted to passing compartment 7, but you claimed to see nothing. Yet a photograph in your possession, a young man resembling Kovács, inscribed with affection, suggests a deeper connection. Who is this István, and what did Kovács know of him?" Miss Henshaw's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "István was my brother. He vanished during a Hungarian uprising 3 years ago, presumed dead. Kovács contacted me last month, claiming he had information about István's fate. I met him in Paris before we boarded, but he gave me nothing, only vague promises. I passed his compartment hoping to speak again, but the door was locked, and I heard nothing." Her hands twisted in her lap, the sincerity of her grief palpable. Next, Poirot addressed Mr. Harold Grayson, whose brash demeanor had dulled to a wary tension. "Monsieur Grayson, your business interests clashed with Kovács's treaty, which threatened your contracts. You claim to have been in the smoking lounge all evening, yet the steward's account places you there only briefly. Where were you when Kovács was killed?" Grayson's ruddy face flushed deeper. All right. I stretched the truth. I left the lounge to make a call from the train's telegraph office. Business, you understand. Kovach's treaty was going to cost me a fortune, sure, but I didn't kill him. I was back in the lounge by 10. Ask anyone. His voice carried a defensive edge, his eyes darting to the others as if seeking corroboration. Poirot's gaze moved to Monsieur and Madame Dubois, whose youthful charm now seemed a calculated mask. You claim to be journalists, yet your sketch of the train's layout, with compartment 7 marked, suggests a purpose beyond reporting. What was your true interest in Kovach? Madame Dubois spoke, her voice smooth but guarded. We are journalists, Monsieur Poirot, investigating rumors of Kovach's involvement in illicit dealings. The sketch was for our notes, to understand the train's security. We were in our compartment all evening, together. Her husband nodded, but their synchronized assurance felt rehearsed, their eyes avoiding Poirot's. Finally, Poirot turned to Herr Wilhelm Schmidt, whose clinical composure wavered under the detective's stare. Herr Doctor, you claim to have been reading, yet vials of sedative in your bag raise questions. Did you visit Kovach, perhaps to offer medical aid, or something else? Schmidt adjusted his glasses, his voice clipped. I saw Kovach briefly before dinner, in the lounge. He complained of nerves, asked about sedatives. I advised rest, nothing more. I returned to my compartment and stayed there. My medical supplies are for emergencies, not murder. His tone was firm, but his fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the table. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Each of you has a motive, a thread tying you to Kovach, yet the locked compartment remains the enigma. A killer entered, struck, and vanished without trace. This requires not only motive, but opportunity and cunning. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I urge you to reflect. If there is more to tell, do so before the truth finds you. The passengers exchanged uneasy glances, the silence broken only by the distant groan of the train's engine as workers cleared the tracks. Poirot dismissed them, his mind alight with contradictions. The Countess's meeting with Kovach suggested a personal vendetta, but her age and demeanor made physical violence unlikely. Miss Henshaw's grief was genuine, yet her brother's connection to Kovach hinted at deeper secrets. Grayson's business motive was clear, but his absence from the lounge was brief. The Dubois couple's sketch pointed to premeditation, yet their alibi was airtight. Schmidt's sedatives offered a means to subdue Kovach, but his reticence suggested fear rather than guilt. Returning to his compartment, Poirot reviewed the clues. The lipstick on the cigarette, absent from any woman's admitted habits, gnawed at him. The empty sapphire hilt suggested a stolen prize, perhaps the key Kovach referenced, and the ventilation grill, noted in the blueprints, remained unexamined. He resolved to inspect it at once, suspecting it might hold a physical clue, a thread, a tool, a trace of the killer's passage. As the train lurched forward, freed from the snow, Poirot felt the puzzle tightening. The killer was among them, their alibi a fragile facade. The sapphire rails, with its gleaming exterior, carried a darkness within, but Hercule Poirot's little gray cells were relentless. The truth, he knew, was not far off. Chapter 6. The Sapphire's Secret. The sapphire rails pressed forward through the Austrian dawn, its wheels grinding against the freshly cleared tracks, the snow outside now a soft veil rather than a barrier. Within the train, The atmosphere was taut, the passengers' unease palpable as they moved through the corridors, with guarded glances. Hercule Poirot, however, was a study in calm resolve, his small frame navigating the narrow passage to compartment 7 with the precision of a metronome. His green eyes gleamed with purpose, his mind a whirl of connections and contradictions, each clue a stepping stone toward the truth. The locked compartment, the sapphire-hilted dagger, the cryptic note, all pointed to a deeper secret, one that Poirot was determined to unearth. Inside compartment 7, the scene remained as Poirot had left it. Laszlo Kovac's body covered with a sheet, the sapphire dagger removed for safekeeping, and the air heavy with the lingering scent of that peculiar cigarette. Poirot's attention returned to the ventilation grill above the desk, a detail he had noted in the train's blueprints. Armed with a small toolkit provided by Monsieur Bouc, he climbed onto the desk, his movements agile despite his fastidious attire. The grill, a delicate lattice of brass, was secured with tiny screws. With a jeweler's precision, Poirot loosened them, revealing a narrow duct barely wide enough for a hand. His gloved fingers probed inside, extracting a single crumpled piece of fabric, a scrap of black lace, delicate and feminine, caught on a rough edge. "Intéressant," Poirot murmured, holding the lace to the light. It was not the coarse material of a servant's garb, but the fine work of a couturier, suggesting a woman of means. His mind flashed to Countess Volkov's black velvet gown, though she had claimed no entry to the compartment. The lace was a whisper of evidence, but a whisper was enough for Poirot's little gray cells. He turned next to the cigarette, its unfamiliar brand a persistent anomaly. Retrieving it from the ashtray, he noted again the faint trace of lipstick, coral, not the bold red favored by the Countess, nor the subtle pink of Madame Dubois. Miss Henshaw, he recalled, wore no makeup, a detail that ruled her out. The cigarette's brand, Étoile Noire, was rare, not stocked by the train's lounge. Poirot summoned Pierre, the steward, who confirmed that no passenger had requested such a brand, though he recalled seeing a similar pack in Herr Schmidt's medical bag during the luggage inspection. Poirot sought out Schmidt in the lounge car, where the doctor sat alone, his journal open but unread. "Herr Schmidt," Poirot began, his voice deceptively mild. "You spoke of meeting Kovacs before dinner, discussing his nerves. Did you share a cigarette? Perhaps one of your Étoile Noire?" Schmidt's eyes flickered, his composure faltering for a moment. Yes, we smoked together in the lounge. Kovacs was agitated, speaking of pressures in Budapest. I offered him a cigarette to calm him, but I did not enter his compartment, Monsieur Poirot." His fingers tightened on his journal, and Poirot noted the defensive edge in his voice. "And the sedative vials in your bag?" Poirot pressed. "Could they have been used to render Kovacs unconscious before the dagger struck?" Schmidt paled. "Those are for medical emergencies, severe pain, convulsions. I swear, I gave him nothing. He refused any medication, said he could not afford to be dulled." His protest carried conviction, but Poirot sensed a withheld truth, a fear Schmidt could not mask. Returning to the sapphire dagger, now secured in Bouc's office, Poirot examined it under a magnifying glass provided by the director. The sapphire, when twisted, had revealed an empty compartment, but closer inspection showed faint scratches inside the hilt, as if something had been forcibly removed. A microfilm, perhaps, or a tiny key, something small enough to fit yet valuable enough to kill for. The note in Kovac's notebook, "The sapphire holds the key," took on new weight. Poirot hypothesized that the dagger's hilt had concealed a critical item stolen by the killer to protect or exploit its contents. He requested Bouc to arrange a discreet telegraph to Budapest, asking for information on Kovac's diplomatic activities. The reply, received hours later as the train neared the Hungarian border, was illuminating. Kovacs had been investigating a smuggling ring trafficking rare gems and antiquities, with ties to Budapest's elite. His treaty negotiations were a cover for gathering evidence, and he was due to present his findings to authorities upon arrival. The microfilm, Poirot deduced, likely contained proof of the ring's operations, names, dates, transactions. The lace, the cigarette, the empty hilt. These clues pointed to a killer with access to Kovac's compartment and knowledge of his secret. Poirot revisited the passengers' alibis in his mind. The Countess's letters suggested blackmail, but the lace did not match her gown's trim. Miss Henshaw's connection to her brother was emotional, not criminal, and she lacked the means for such a calculated act. Grayson's motive was financial, but his absence from the lounge was too brief for a murder requiring precision. The Dubois couple's sketch of the train hinted at planning, yet their alibi held firm. Schmidt's sedatives and cigarettes placed him near Kovac, but his fear suggested he was a witness, not a perpetrator. Poirot's thoughts returned to the ventilation grill. The lace suggested a woman's presence, but the duct was too small for escape. Could it have been used to pass a tool, a sedative-soaked cloth, or even the microfilm? He examined the blueprints again, noting a service hatch in the corridor ceiling, accessible to someone familiar with the train's design. The Dubois couple's sketch loomed in his mind. Had they known more than they admitted? As the train rattled toward Budapest, Poirot felt the puzzle tightening. The killer had acted with audacity, believing the locked compartment would shield them. But Hercule Poirot was not so easily deceived. The Sapphire's secret was no longer hidden, and the truth, he knew, was within his grasp. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. The Sapphire rails surged toward Budapest, its navy blue carriages slicing through the Hungarian twilight, the snow now a mere dusting on the plains. Inside, the dining car was a stage set for revelation, its chandeliers casting a stark light over the assembled passengers. The air was thick with anticipation, the earlier elegance replaced by a palpable dread. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the room, his small stature commanding as he surveyed the faces before him. Countess Volkoff's icy hauteur, Miss Henshaw's tearful anxiety, Mr. Grayson's wary bluster, the Dubois couple's guarded unity, and Herr Schmidt's clinical reserve. Each bore the weight of secrets, but Poirot's little gray cells had woven their threads into a tapestry of truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade. The murder of Monsieur Laszlo Kovacs was no act of impulse, but a calculated strike, designed to silence a man who held a dangerous secret. The sapphire dagger, the locked compartment, the missing microfilm, all point to a conspiracy woven among you. Let us unravel it. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes piercing each passenger in turn. The facts are these. Kovacs was investigating a smuggling ring in Budapest, trafficking rare gems and antiquities. A microfilm, hidden in the sapphire hilt of the dagger, contained evidence of this ring, names, transactions, betrayals. The killer entered a locked compartment, struck with precision, and removed the microfilm, believing the locked door would confound justice. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily confounded. He turned to the ventilation grill, a detail now central to his deductions. The grill above Kovach's desk, too small for a person, was used to pass a tool or clue. A scrap of black lace, fine and costly, was caught there, a trace of the killer's presence. He held up the delicate fragment, its weave glinting in the light. This lace does not match the attire of Countess Volkov, whose gown is velvet, nor Miss Henshaw, who wears none. It points elsewhere. Poirot's gaze settled on Madame Dubois, whose composure faltered, her hand tightening on her husband's. Madame Dubois, your sketch of the train's layout, with compartment 7 marked, betrays a knowledge of its vulnerabilities. The service hatch in the corridor ceiling, accessible from your compartment, allowed entry to the ventilation system. You used it to deliver a sedative-soaked cloth, rendering Kovach unconscious. Then, with the sapphire dagger, you struck, removing the microfilm to protect your own role in the smuggling ring. Madame Dubois's face drained of color, but she laughed, a brittle sound. "This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. We are journalists, nothing more. We were in our compartment all evening." Monsieur Dubois nodded vigorously, but his eyes betrayed panic. Poirot raised a hand, silencing their protest. "Non, madame. The lace matches the trim of your evening shawl, observed in the dining car. Fibers from your dress were found in the service hatch, caught as you maneuvered through it. And the Étoile Noire cigarette, with its coral lipstick, bears your shade, not the Countess's red, nor Miss Henshaw's bare lips. You smoked with Kovach earlier, gaining his trust before executing your plan." The room erupted in murmurs. Countess Volkov's eyes widened, Miss Henshaw gasped, and Grayson muttered under his breath. Herr Schmidt's fingers stilled, his earlier nervousness replaced by grim fascination. Monsieur Dubois sprang to his feet. "You have no proof. This is conjecture." Poirot's voice remained steady. "The proof, monsieur, is in the details. The microfilm, I suspect, is still in your possession, hidden in your valise's false bottom, where you concealed your true identities as operatives for the smuggling ring. Kovach's evidence threatened to expose you, and so he had to die." Madame Dubois's defiance crumbled, her shoulders slumping as her husband's protests faltered. Poirot signaled to Bouc, who had quietly summoned gendarmes waiting at Budapest station. As the train slowed, the officers boarded, their boots heavy on the platform. The Dubois couple, their faces ashen, were escorted away, their denials drowned by the clatter of handcuffs. Poirot turned to the remaining passengers, his expression softening. "The truth, mes amis, is a light that reveals all, even in the darkest corners. You may return to your lives, but carry this lesson. No secret escapes the little gray cells." As the passengers dispersed, Bouc approached, his relief palpable. "Poirot, you are a marvel. How do you see what we cannot?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "It is not magic, mon ami, but method, order, observation, and the courage to face the truth." The Sapphire rails, its journey nearly complete, stood ready to deliver its passengers to Budapest. Poirot lingered in the dining car, his mind already turning to the quiet pleasures of a tisane in a Budapest cafe. The killer was unmasked, the microfilm recovered, and justice served. Yet, as always, the human heart remained a greatest mystery of all. Chapter 8. The Resolution. The Sapphire rails eased into Budapest's Keleti station as twilight deepened, its navy blue carriages gleaming under the platform's gaslights. The snow had ceased, leaving a crisp stillness in the air, as if the city itself held its breath after the drama of the journey. Hercule Poirot stood on the platform, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, his Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle. His green eyes, ever observant, watched as the remaining passengers disembarked, their faces a mixture of relief and disquiet. The arrest of Monsieur and Madame Dubois had lifted the shadow of murder from the train, but the echoes of their deception lingered, a reminder of the fragility of trust. Monsieur Bouc, his usual ebullience restored, joined Poirot, his breath forming small clouds in the cold. "Mon cher Poirot, you have saved the reputation of the Sapphire rails, a murder solved before we reached our destination. What a triumph!" His eyes sparkled, though a trace of weariness betrayed the strain of the past days. "But tell me, how did you know it was the Dubois couple? So young, so charming, yet such villains." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "It is always the details, mon ami. The lace in the grill, the lipstick on the cigarette, the sketch of the train. These were not mere clues, but signposts to the truth. The Dubois, with their journalistic facade, knew the train's secrets and exploited them. Their motive was not passion, but self-preservation, for Kovac's microfilm would have exposed their role in the smuggling ring. The little gray cells, Bouc, they see what the heart conceals." As porters bustled about, unloading trunks and valises, Poirot's gaze followed the departing passengers. Countess Irina Volkov, her head held high, stepped into a waiting car, her emerald necklace catching the light. Her dignity was intact, but Poirot sensed a resolve to guard her secrets more closely henceforth. Miss Clara Henshaw, clutching her carpet-bag, paused to gaze at the station's grand arches, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. The photograph of her brother Istvan, though unanswered by Kovac's death, had stirred a determination to seek her own answers. Mr. Harold Grayson, his boisterous confidence subdued, muttered about telegrams to Chicago, already recalculating his business ventures in light of the failed treaty. Herr Wilhelm Schmidt, carrying his medical bag, walked briskly toward a taxi, his face etched with introspection, as if questioning the ethics of his reticence. The gendarmes had recovered the microfilm from the false bottom of Madame Dubois' valise, confirming Poirot's deduction. The tiny reel, now in the hands of Budapest's authorities, listed names and transactions tying the smuggling ring to prominent figures across Europe. The Dubois couple, revealed as operatives for the ring, faced a long reckoning, their charm no match for the law's severity. Poirot, however, felt no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved, a balance restored. Bouc clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "Come, mon ami, you must join me for a drink in Budapest, a toast to your genius." Poirot shook his head gently. "Merci, Bouc, but I prefer a tisane in a quiet café, where I may reflect in peace. The Sapphire rails will run again, and I trust without such dark cargo." He tipped his hat, his smile enigmatic, and turned toward the city, where the lights of Budapest beckoned like stars in the gathering dusk. As he walked away, Poirot's thoughts lingered on the human tapestry he had unraveled. Each passenger had carried a motive, a secret, a shadow of guilt. Yet only the Dubois couple had crossed into murder. The Sapphire, with its hidden key, had been both lure and trap, a symbol of greed's deadly allure. Poirot's little gray cells, ever vigilant, had prevailed, but he knew the world would offer new puzzles, new hearts to decipher. For now, though, Budapest awaited, and with it, the simple pleasure of order restored.